That one source of comfort for me is that I think people lose track of how normal, both in societies in general and in American society in particular, serious contention and sense of upheaval is, and how these things historically move back and forth between uh, one commitment or a level of activity and then an oscillation to the opposite. If you think how this country was born in the context of fundamental disputes about slavery, and how for the first 60 years of the Republic, those disputes festered and created extreme antagonisms, great difficulties in all domains, and then a civil war which killed more Americans than any other war. And if you look at the post-Civil War period, Reconstruction and lynchings in the South and fundamental upheavals over what segregation means and so forth. You see that, but not just those issues. Andrew Jackson's administration is characterized by a wave of populism and throwing out office holders and severe assault on Indians and expulsion of them from various territories. And then you get reactions to that that are more protective and more thoughtful. Ulysses Grant, wild corruption, lots of problems in the late 1800s associated with populism and monopolies and upheaval, and World War One, basic issues about sedition, um, and huge fights internally in the US about isolationism versus engagement in the period after that. And just in my own lifetime, McCarthyism, the assassinations associated with Jack Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the extreme divisions associated with Vietnam. So I think we tend to kind of filter all that out and forget how much contention there is historically in this society. So we've been robust in the face of that contention, and I very much hope we would continue to be in the time ahead. Well, I think we all tend to live in the moment, and the present is so much more visibly dominant for us. And we have discount rates and uncertainties about the future, and the past recedes into a kind of hazy atmosphere with lots of the noise filtered out. When we think back on it, we see it as a more straight line than it is. Yeah, as a lawyer, I think the courts do represent a significant bulwark, hopefully one that will stand and represent a degree of impartiality and measured consideration as we go through political tumult in the years immediately ahead. Um, I don't think it's so unusual that we find a lot of contention around these court decisions. Coming back to my point about sort of cycles and oscillation, I think it's really extraordinary how much change of a fundamental kind there's been over the course of lifetimes like yours and mine, lifetimes that stretch back to the middle of the 20th century. Um, I think really never in human history has there been so much rethinking of issues like attitudes towards race, gender, the environment, sexuality. Um, it's pretty fundamental. And it doesn't surprise me that there are reactions against that, given the magnitude of that. And how could there not be? And it's natural, I think, that there would be both some um, going further than the society is willing to tolerate, and then some reeling back, and then some further advances and some further pulling back. To me, it's the nature of social change. So that makes me a little more understanding about what's going on, and a little more optimistic about it, even though I too live in the present and am anguished about it. If you take the 1950s and the later 1950s, the Eisenhower years of relative civility and tranquility, I think there's much that we would hanker after in that mood, but a lot of it occurred because a lot of things were papered over. And all these issues of race and gender and environment were simply not articulated, not well addressed, subordinated.
Mhm.
So if I had to choose between that world and this one, I'll take this one.
Well, well,
Well, I'd like to think that there's a substantial population of people who cares about the military and preserving its qualities and recognizing its sacrifices, and at the same time cares about civil liberties and
yeah.
the challenge in some dimension that you began asking about is how we reconcile those two things.